The morning was slow, wrapped in that quiet kind of peace only Sundays knew how to carry. Light leaked through the kitchen blinds in long, golden slits, casting soft lines across the countertop where she moved, barefoot, half asleep, wearing one of his old college t-shirts like it belonged to her. Maybe it did by now. She stirred the eggs with one hand, the other holding a chipped mug she always used. That thing had been in the cabinet before he moved in, and she never drank from anything else. Asterisk, he sat at the small kitchen table, legs curled under the chair, nursing his own coffee. It had cooled, but he liked the way the mug warmed his hands. There was music playing low in the background, something acoustic, something forgettable but calming. He watched the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her body moved through the space like it had always been hers, and maybe in a way he hadn't admitted, he liked seeing her like this more than anything else in the world. Asterisk, you should get married, he said, half a joke, half a test, though he didn't know what he was testing. Asterisk, she paused, mid-stir, turned her head just enough for him to catch her smirk. Asterisk, I would, she said, without missing a beat. If you'd just ask. Asterisk, there was silence. Not heavy, not yet, but noticeable, like a breath held too long. He laughed, because it felt safer than sitting in what she'd said. But she didn't laugh with him this time. She just turned back to the stove. Asterisk, he watched her in that moment, something unfamiliar tugging at the edge of his chest. He'd known her for 5 years. 2 of those, they'd lived like this, like whatever this was. Roommates, yes. Friends, yes. But more than that too, a rhythm they never named. Mornings where she poured his coffee without asking. Nights where they shared the same couch. Too close for comfort. Too familiar to pull away. Asterisk, she brought him a plate, slid it across the table, then poured more coffee into his mug without asking. He thanked her out of habit. Asterisk, big plans today, she asked, sitting across from him, her own mug nestled between both hands. Asterisk, he shook his head. Just writing. You. Asterisk, she shrugged. Groceries, laundry, life. Asterisk, he smiled. Riveting. Asterisk, a breeze from the open window nudged the curtains. The eggs were too salty, but he didn't say anything. Her foot brushed his under the table, maybe by accident, maybe not. He didn't move. Asterisk, the moment passed. Or maybe it lingered, trailing behind them like perfume. They didn't say anything more about what she'd said about him asking, but it lived there, just beneath the quiet. A thread pulled loose, a thought he couldn't fold back into place. Asterisk, she stood first, taking her plate to the sink. The light caught the curve of her neck, the rise of her shoulders. Her presence filled the room, in ways he hadn't let himself notice before. Or maybe he had, maybe he'd always noticed and just didn't know what to do about it. Asterisk, she rinsed the plate. The water ran. The flickering light above the sink buzzed once, briefly. Asterisk, I was kidding, he said finally, trying to make it light again, though it came out softer than he meant. Asterisk, she didn't look at him, just turned off the tap and set the plate in the rack. Maybe I wasn't, she said. Then she left the room. Not abruptly, not coldly, just quietly, like it was any other Sunday morning, like she hadn't just shifted something inside him that wouldn't settle back. It hadn't started with anything romantic. No one ever expected it to. After college, he was lost in the usual way, a degree, a few internships. No real plan. She had a spare room. That's all it was. He'd known her since his last year. Of undergrad, she was a visiting lecturer in a department he barely passed through, more a familiar face than a close friend, but somehow they'd kept crossing paths at readings, art shows, small parties hosted by muchos. She had this easy warmth, like a lamp left on in a quiet room. Asterisk, when he mentioned he was couchsurfing after graduation. She offered the room without hesitation. Stay as long as you need, she'd said. That was over 2 years ago. Asterisk, he moved in on a Thursday. He remembered it because it rained. She helped him carry boxes, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, music playing from her phone in the kitchen while they unpacked. That night, they sat on the couch with takeout and a bottle of cheap wine. She asked him what scared him most about being out of school. He didn't know then. He said something vague. She listened anyway. Asterisk, somewhere along the way, things just settled. She made space in the fridge for his things. He learned how she liked her coffee. They started watching shows together. First 1 episode, then 3, then entire seasons. One night bled into another, until there were routines that hadn't been agreed upon, only grown into. Asterisk, it wasn't dating. They didn't sleep in the same bed, didn't flirt, didn't even brush up against those lines. And yet asterisk, there was a night he couldn't forget. She'd come home late, tired. He was already on the couch, half asleep. She joined him, no words, just her body curling into his side. Her head found his shoulder. He froze, but didn't move. The credits of some movie rolled in the background, and her breath evened out. He stayed still for over an hour, not because he was afraid to wake her, but because something about that stillness felt sacred. Asterisk, he thought about that moment often, more than he admitted. Asterisk, there were other moments too. The time she laughed, at one of his bad jokes and reached out to squeeze his hand, not letting go right away, or the time he brought her soup when she was sick, and she said, "You take better care of me than anyone else ever has," or the way her voice softened when she said his name, not always, just sometimes, but they never said anything. They never needed to. There was a line neither of them drew, but both respected. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of comfort, maybe because naming something meant risking its loss. Sometimes when it rained, like it did tonight, he'd sit near the window with a book he didn't read, just listening to the sound of it hitting the glass. She'd be across the room, legs tucked under her on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The TV would be on, muted. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. Her laugh might echo off the walls, low and unguarded. And still, neither of them would say what hovered in the space between them. There were no boundaries, but there were rules, unspoken ones. Don't talk about what this is. Don't ask if they're seeing anyone. Don't sit too close unless the moment asks for it. Don't touch unless it feels like an accident. But sometimes he caught her looking at him a second too long, and sometimes she caught him looking back, and sometimes that was enough, or maybe it never really was. The flowers came on a Tuesday. He heard the doorbell, heard her laugh when she opened it. A moment later, she walked into the kitchen with a bouquet pressed to her chest, warm shades of orange and blush, something expensive looking and freshly arranged. He looked up from his laptop, forced a smile. From Leo, she said, voice light, unreadable. That guy I told you about at work. Right, Leo, the one who brought her extra coffee sometimes. The one who leaned in a little too closely when she showed him things on her laptop. The one who remembered her birthday without needing a reminder. There, nice, he said, then added, thoughtful guy. She placed the flowers in a tall vase, careful with each stem. He went back to staring at his screen, the words on it suddenly illegible. That evening, she mentioned over dinner that she might grab drinks with Leo sometime, just to see. He nodded, said something like, you should meant it like a blessing, but it came out hollow. He did the dishes after while she showered. He liked the sound of the water running, the soft shuffle of her movements above. It made the house feel alive. Full when she came down, her hair was damp and pulled back. She wore a worn sweatshirt and socks that never matched. She passed behind him, lightly brushing his shoulder. He felt it more than he should have. Later. When the house was quiet and the night had settled, he slipped outside to the porch. The air was cool, the kind that carried memory. He sat with his knees pulled up, a blanket over his lap. The string lights above him flickering as if they, too, were unsure. She found him like that, maybe an hour later. She stepped outside without a word, wrapping her arms around herself, her presence soft and heavy beside him. He didn't look at her right away. You okay? She asked, not prying, just wondering. He took a moment before answering. You're gonna leave one day, aren't you? The words surprised even him. He didn't mean to say them out loud. She didn't respond at first. Didn't rush to reassure him or laugh it off. She just lowered herself beside him, knees tucked, like his, eyes out toward the dark. I don't know, she said quietly. There was something about her perfume in the cold air, lingering. It was faint, but familiar. Like the scent of something you've grown used to, something you didn't realize you'd miss until you thought of losing it. The silence stretched between them, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like both of them were filling it with things they couldn't say. What he meant was, I don't know what this is, but I don't want to lose it. What she meant, perhaps, was, I feel it too, I just don't know what to do with it. Her arm brushed his, as she shifted, barely touching, but it was enough to make his breath catch. They sat like that, side by side, the soft hum of crickets somewhere in the distance, the world going quiet around them. She didn't say she was staying. He didn't ask her not to go, but something passed between them in that hush, something wordless and warm and impossibly heavy. It was something like love, but not, not yet. She was packing in that absent-minded way she always did, not rushed, not organized, just folding and refolding, placing things into a small weekend bag with pauses between each item. The light from the bedside lamp cast a warm glow across the sheets, softening the edges of the moment. He leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her silently. The bed was unmade. They'd napped there just last week, she on her side, facing the wall, he behind her but not touching. He remembered listening to her breathing, counting seconds between each one. The imprint of her body still felt present in the mattress. Going somewhere fancy? He asked, keeping his voice light. She smiled without looking at him. Not really, just a couple days out of town. Leo. A quiet beat. Yeah, he nodded, eyes fixed on the sweater she was folding, the gray one she always wore when they watched movies on rainy nights. He didn't ask why she was bringing it. Asterisk, she reached for a charger tangled near the edge of the nightstand. He stepped forward to help, but she got there first. Their hands brushed. Just for a second, but long enough. Asterisk, you should just marry someone. Already, he said, same words as before, same casual tone. A joke, or at least it wanted to be. Asterisk, she stopped. Really stopped, and when she turned to face him, there was no teasing in her eyes this time. Asterisk, I would, she said softly, if you'd just ask. Asterisk, the silence that followed didn't feel like surprise. It felt like something inevitable landing gently between them. Something long delayed, finally allowed to speak. Asterisk, she looked at him for a second longer. Then picked up her bag, walked toward the door, and paused just enough for him to feel it. Then she walked out, leaving the door half open. Asterisk, he stood there a long time. The room still humming with the echo of her words. He sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the sweater still left behind. Everything suddenly felt louder. The ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of a car outside, the beat of his own pulse behind his ears. Asterisk, later that night, the house was still, too quiet, like it was missing something. Asterisk, he walked into the kitchen, aimless, and opened the cabinet without thinking. His hand found the old coffee mug she always used, the chipped one with a faded pattern on the side. He hadn't noticed how often he reached for it until now. Asterisk, he held it in both hands, stared at it like it could explain something he'd missed. It was warm from memory alone. Asterisk, everything that had been unsaid between them now felt impossibly simple. Obvious. Asterisk, she hadn't asked for anything big. No confession, no scene. Asterisk, just a question. Asterisk, one that was now sitting quietly in the space between his hands. She returned on a Monday morning. He heard the sound of her keys in the door, the familiar shuffle of her shoes being kicked off in the hallway. The house was quiet otherwise, as if it had been holding its breath in her absence. Asterisk, he was on the couch, same as always, except everything felt different now. Not just because she was back, but because of what she'd said before she left. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. Her voice, low and certain. If you'd just ask. Asterisk, she walked in, carrying her weekend bag. Her hair was pulled back, her face calm, unreadable. She looked at him the way she always did, like he was a fixture in her space, but this time, it held something more. Not hope, exactly. Not expectation, just waiting. Asterisk, he stood up slowly, said nothing, then reached into the drawer by the coffee table and pulled out a small ring box. He'd bought it months ago, for reasons he hadn't wanted to examine too closely. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't even wrapped. It had just been sitting there, waiting, like he had. Asterisk, he held it out to her. No speeches, no fanfare. This is me asking, he said. She didn't move at first, didn't react the way the movies said people should. There were no tears, no trembling hands, just a long, steady look that felt like a quiet yes before her mouth ever opened. Asterisk, then she stepped forward and sat beside him. She took his hand, gently, lacing her fingers with his. The ring box sat unopened between them. Neither of them said anything more. It was enough. Asterisk, later, they made coffee. She used the old mug, the one with the chip near the rim. He watched her from the doorway, the sunlight casting soft edges around her silhouette. She moved the same way she always had in that kitchen, barefoot, relaxed, but now he saw her, as someone who had chosen to stay, not just physically, but fully. Asterisk, he didn't announce it to anyone, neither did she. There were no photos, no updates, no grand celebrations. The world stayed as it was, quiet, steady. The change was only in them. Asterisk, in the way her hand reached for his when they passed in the hallway. In the way their silences deepened, not from distance, but from knowing. In the way she leaned her head on his shoulder as they sat on the couch together, the TV on low, their coffee mugs forgotten on the table. The ring box still beside them, unopened, but no longer needed as proof. Asterisk, one night, weeks later, she whispered, "It's always been you." Asterisk, he didn't respond, just pulled the blanket over both of them and held her closer. Asterisk, and every morning after, he woke up to the sound of her humming in the kitchen, the scent of coffee in the air, sunlight sliding through the blinds like before, but now, it all belonged to something they could finally name. This was never just a joke. This was home.